was totally wrong, because I thought for sure that you could use witness reports to gauge this and understand like when we could go out. You can't. The best way to know that is by going out and getting your hands dirty, out in the field, boots on the ground, and taking really great, meticulous notes.
You're listening to the Cryptid Crew Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Childers. Before we get started, if you've had an encounter or an experience or just something unexplained, click on our link tree in the description and share your encounter. Thank you for listening to the Cryptid Crew Podcast. On this episode of the Cryptid Crew Podcast, I'm super excited to welcome back to the show creator of Sasquatch Data Project, Sasquatch researcher, and nature lover, Terrestrial. Terrestrial, thank you for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here and give you some updates of what I've been working on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is fantastic to have you back on the show, and been looking forward to this and some of the new things that you've been working on. But if you can, tell the listeners first what got you started in the world of Bigfoot.
Yeah, so I've been interested pretty much since I was really tiny. I think I was like 5 years old when I first saw Doug Hychek's Legend Meets Science. And that was where I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film for the first time. And I just remember sitting on my couch next to my dad, and just my mind was blown. I was like, this is the most magnificent, but also the most mortifying thing I've ever seen in my whole life. I was like totally into it, but also just terrified. And it was then that my like love for the subject began. You know, like through school and whatnot, I had picked up books, and then Finding Bigfoot came on, I think when I was in like middle school, and that really, fueled the fire because the first episode was in my hometown, literally, like in my backyard. And I don't know, it just kind of blew my mind that there was activity and, all these reports and researchers around me. But it really wasn't until after college when I started researching on my own, and I created the Sasquatch Data Project. So it's been kind of a winding path, kind of, to get here. At least to have Sasquatch research take up, so much of my life and my time and my brain space. But yeah.
Absolutely. I guess the Patterson-Gimlin film would stick out, and anybody that saw that first would remember that video quite vividly.
Yeah. I mean, it's a super interesting piece of footage, and I have it framed on my wall. You can't see it in the frame, but it is like on my wall because it was just one of those defining moments in my life that just has stayed in my brain, and I feel like I can still remember just so vividly watching it on the screen. But yeah, it is a really fascinating piece of footage, and one I love to kind of dig into every now and then and see what I can learn more about it.
Right. Yeah, I think I could talk about that particular film for a long time. That's just, I think 50 something seconds of that film has changed a lot of people's lives, and got them in something that you enjoy. I enjoy doing. That being said, tell us the nuts and bolts of Sasquatch Data Project.
Yeah, so the Sasquatch Data Project started out with basically, I'm a big data nerd. I love running numbers. I love statistics and data science and that kind of thing. And I realized that we didn't have a really good resource as researchers to run the numbers. There's a lot of stuff that gets said in this field that doesn't necessarily have the data or the information to, securely back it up. So I was just like craving a resource where I'm like, well, we have all these witness reports, thousands and thousands of witness reports. Surely there's something to learn from these. And surely there's a way to put them into a format where we can use them for data analysis. And so the Sasquatch Data Project really started off with a very simple question. I had heard somebody say that, Sasquatches are more active under a full moon. And I was like, well, how do we know that? Because as far as I know, nobody's actually run the numbers to confirm that statement. And so that's when I decided to sit down and start going through witness reports and just parsing out the, useful bits of information, shoving it into a spreadsheet, and then seeing what pops out the other side when I run it through my code. So that's how it's kind of started. It's still growing. I finally, finished parsing all of the public BFRO reports, and I'm in the process of cleaning it so that it can become an open source data set. I'm a huge advocate for having accessible data that anyone can have access to that's free, no barriers to entry. If you want to research it, you can have it. That's in the process, but now it's also become kind of this project to also give researchers science resources. So I'm trying to put together resources so that we can make sure that when we're in the field, that we're, collecting the necessary data to run analysis, like so that when we do run analyses on it, we can actually draw information out of it, like making sure we get as much information as possible. But we're doing witness reports, making sure that we're covering all of our bases and that kind of thing. So Sasquatch Data Project is kind of a multifaceted thing at this point, but I love it and it's fun.
I've seen and read, especially on social media, a lot of your different research stats that you have, done. And there anything from hair color to time of day, season, physical attributes as far as size, I guess, skinny, muscular, and so forth. And you put in a lot of work. There's a lot to sift through. Once you start a particular project, just say a state, for example, how long does it take to go through and get the final product?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I was parsing everything by hand. So like one report would take me, anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes, like depending on how long it was. And, um, the data set that I'm putting together has over 160 columns. So it's just like infinite information because I just want to have one comprehensive resource. Now, thankfully, with, things like AI, and there's different like Python libraries that you can use to pull out information. It takes me, it's sped up the process tremendously. So what would have taken me years to complete, I got done in, like a month, which is really great. Now it takes me pretty much no time at all. The thing that takes the longest amount of time is cleaning the data and making sure that everything is correct and checking and doing spot checks and whatnot. So that does still take a considerable amount of time. But when it comes to a statistics standpoint, like when I'm running statistics on a particular state, or if I'm trying to come up with a new, um, you know, investigation to do with the data, it really just depends on how quickly I can write the code. Now I have code bases where, like, if I want to look at Georgia one day and then North Carolina the next day, all I have to do is change the state name. It's just like one word in my code, and then I have the whole thing. So now it's really quick. And the thing that takes the longest with that is making the graphics to post on social media and stuff. So that's really great because it's sped up the process. And, that's something else that I'm working on too, is trying to build a Python library called Bigfoot.py so that other researchers can reference the data set and get whatever information they want out of it too in a really easy way. Um, so the goal is to make it as efficient and easy as possible to get whatever information it is that you want out of the data. And um, a lot of that's trial and error on my part. Like, what do I want to know? And then seeing how quickly I can do it. But yeah, I've kind of streamlined the process now, which is really great.
That will be extraordinarily helpful to researchers, the ones but boots on the ground, and like you said, certain times of the year or a full moon, like you said, you just hear these things and people go off of what they hear, but to have actual data that has been gone over and checked and correspond with other stuff, that's very important.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When I think about it, because folks who are researching in the field will come to me and ask questions sometimes, like, "Oh, what is I live in this state. Do you have information for this state? When's the best time to go out, etc." And I think it's an important distinction to make too that the witness reports are only one component, and there are issues with the witness reports, and so I always like to remind folks that the best way to figure out like when to go out and whatnot is to take really good notes and to gather really um, high quality data in the field. And that takes a lot of time, but I hope people do it because what you really need is null data or like when stuff doesn't happen. And the witness reports give us when something did happen, but then another layer on top of that, the person had to actually report it to someone and then it had to get posted online. So, there's different types of biases that go into that and get introduced into the data. So, um, there are some things that I can say, like, okay, so, the data is saying that we are seeing particular trends, either seasonally or with the moon phases or uh, whatever it might be. But the best way to figure it out is like for the researcher to go out into the field, take really good notes, and report back when nothing happens, because that's the thing that really tells you and solidifies, like, yes, this is a good time to go out because, 9 times out of 10, nothing happened. But then on this one particular date, what's special about that? And then see if it happens again whenever those conditions roll back around. But it's this type of data that's going to be really impactful for the field and I think really help researchers get what they're looking for. The witness reports are good for things too, like, I don't know, there's so many things that get said with such certainty that I just wonder, like, where is this coming from? Like, why? There's no numbers to back this up, but um, yeah, it's important, and I'm really passionate about that. I'm really passionate about having some kind of data to back up stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. How many reports do you think there are that are documented of actual encounter?
It's hard to say because, we can't know for sure. We can never know for sure if the encounter that is stated and published actually happened or not. I can tell you that, there's about 5,100 reports from the United States and Canada off of the BFRO website that are publicly available. And that's the only public data set that I've gone through. So I can't comment on any of the other ones. But I don't know. I honestly don't know how many are, um, you know, true encounters or misidentifications. And it's important to note, too, out of those 5,100, approximately half are Class B. So really, we're talking about 2,500 Class A reports. And I don't really give much attention to the Class B reports because there is so much room for error because the typical person isn't super familiar with their environment, especially when it comes to different sounds in the environment. And that can very easily get misidentified. So I pretty much only focus on the Class A's. But yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. And I don't have a good answer for you.
Well, that's all right. That was a good answer, and I can see what you're saying by especially the class. And I guess let me clarify this: Class A is an actual sighting for people that don't know. Class B would be maybe some type of evidence of vocalizations or tracks or tree breaks or wood knocks. Am I correct on that?
Yes. Yep. And sometimes if somebody sees something but they can't say for sure what they saw, they'll classify it as a B. But yeah, most of them are vocalizations, footprints, that kind of thing.
And you bringing that up about the descriptions, you had just posted recently an interesting YouTube short that I saw, and it talked about how people describe their encounters, and from apes, when they were just being discovered, I guess, in the late 18th century, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, the late 1800s.
Late
Well,
18th.
gorillas were officially discovered in the late 1800s. I'm not sure about orangutans and whatnot, but yeah.
Yeah, but could you elaborate a little bit about that on that YouTube short that you had posted? It's very interesting.
Yeah. So basically, I think it's pretty fascinating once you start looking into the history of how the other great apes were, uh, I guess, acknowledged by the scientific community, or at least the Western scientific community, and that whole process, because it sounds very familiar to what we are experiencing in the Sasquatch field. Essentially, before the great apes, like gorillas and orangutans and chimps and whatnot, were officially discovered and documented by Western science, all we had to go off of was folklore. So, and just witness sighting reports, basically. And what I thought was really interesting is how witnesses described the animals, because they weren't giving them biological descriptions, they were defaulting to the paranormal, which I thought was fascinating. So, like, if someone saw an orangutan, frequently the witnesses would say it literally just disappeared before my eyes, or it just disappeared. It vanished into the forest. There was no trace. There were no footprints. It was like a ghost. And, the great apes were seen as ghosts before they were officially discovered, or they were described as like demons. Even gorillas really freaked people out, and they would often describe them as like uh demons or dream creatures, or half human, half beast creatures. And so I thought it was really interesting that almost verbatim people were describing the other great apes in the much of the same way that some folks describe Sasquatch encounters, where they just vanish, or the footprints just stopped, or whatever else they might say, and then attribute uh Sasquatches to some sort of paranormal activity. So I just thought it was really interesting that we have this whole conversation going on back in the 1800s, 1700s, and whatnot. Not only by the people who lived locally in the areas of the other great apes, but also by renowned naturalists and explorers and whatnot. We're using the same type of language to describe them. So I think with that video, I was just trying to convey that, you know, we have historical documentation of totally normal animals being described in much of the same way as Sasquatches are described today. And it's fascinating. It should at least, I'm not trying to argue that they are or are not paranormal, that they're definitely just animals, but we also have to acknowledge that part of how folks describe the unknown is based on what they know. And for some reason, that seems to lean on paranormal language, which is pretty interesting in itself. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, some of that may have to do also with how stealthy, I guess you could say, the creatures are, as far as
Hmm.
ghost or disappearing. And like you'd said, tracks there and then they disappear, or either it's the animal is there and then it's gone. But, and then of course, this as well. You've got your different camps. You have the flesh and blood camp, and then you have I guess we'll call it the woo camp, supernatural or what have you. And some of the things that people describe, or I've had on the show, and have described encounters, I can't necessarily explain it. I was not there to see it, but it doesn't register as flesh and blood, or if it does the animal, does a Bigfoot have the ability to do some of these things? And one of the one of the things I truly believe that they can do is I'm gonna say camouflage or cloak, possibly. What's your opinion about that?
I think that I've done a bit of research into just how animals camouflage themselves in general in forested environments. And also acknowledging before I totally dive in that, there are reports that come out of more sparsely vegetated spaces like deserts and whatnot. But from a forest standpoint, when you have animals that are, you know, brown, black, red, brown, very natural colors, and combine that with I don't know, the detail that comes up a lot in witness reports, that they were completely still, and that they wouldn't have noticed the animal had they not looked in this one particular direction or whatever. Other animals do this. the hair colors that they have are suited for their environments. They have learned to stand really still to stay hidden. And if you're in a forested environment, I could definitely see how one might be very difficult to spot unless it was moving. Movement triggers in our brains that, oh, something is alive. And if something's staying very still, we don't see that movement. I could see how it would be overlooked. I also could see that even if you had your eyes on it, how you could lose it in a forested environment too. When it comes to like the specifics of cloaking and whatnot, um, I tend to like the biological explanation of just, their hair colors are well suited for their environment and they do what other animals do, which is stand really still. They know their environment far better than we do, so they know how to hide, they know how to stay hidden and how to get out of view easily and whatnot. But yeah, that's the extent of at least what I've looked into on that. But like these reports where they are literally like staring at something well, like no obstruction and then it just disappears. I don't know.
Right. There's let me ask you this, Terrestrial. Out of all the witness reports you've gone through, what's one or two that maybe, I'm not going to say stick out to you, but baffle you more than any of the others?
That's a really good question. Well, okay, I've got three different things, if that's okay,
Yeah, that's fine.
that immediately come to mind. The first one is probably the weirdest one that I've read, and not that I don't necessarily think that it happened, but I think that it should be, I don't know, it's the weirdest one that I've read. I'm not sure about the legitimacy. There we go. But I think this was out of Oregon and I can't remember the year. Sorry, I hit my mic. I can't remember the year or anything, but this person claims that they were hiking in the woods and they heard this singing noise. And it was like they heard something harmonizing. Like there were two things harmonizing, and they heard this singing, and it was kind of like reverberating all around them. And so they followed the noise, and it led them to a culvert. I guess a really big one, because they said they looked inside and there were two Sasquatches sitting in the culvert, singing together, harmonizing, and they were like looking at each other. I guess one was here and one was here, and they both turned in unison and looked at them, and their eyes were glowing red, and they just kept singing. And I'm like, that's the creepiest thing I've ever heard. Again, I can't comment on the legitimacy of that report, but it is definitely one that sticks out in my head. I think the one that baffles me is there was one report out of Alabama, uh, close to the relatively close to the NASA center there, I think in Huntsville. And they were staying at this hotel. And apparently the hotel backed up to some kind of either nature preserve or state forest or something. Like I can't remember specifics, but there's some kind of forested area. And there was a guy who was there for business. I think he was working. He had come in to go to he was working at the NASA center. And he said that he was on his hotel balcony and he looked out and he saw a Sasquatch going through the dumpster behind the hotel in the area where it backs up to the forest. And he said he started freaking out and he called hotel security. They had to go down there. They like looked around the area, couldn't find anything. But that one was always really interesting to me because it's honestly like some of the most mundane ones are the most interesting because it's like, why would you take the time and like go through reporting that or go through the trouble of having to do a follow up report and all that? And just because of the location was kind of odd to me as well. But
Yeah,
yeah, there's that. And then,
that sounds extremely
yeah.
odd behind a hotel, unless they had a restaurant or something there that they,
Hmm.
you know, left their food there after the evening, after closing or something. But that's a thought. But yeah, but yeah, like you said, taking the time to actually go through and report
Hmm.
so that happened around
Yeah.
Huntsville, you said, correct?
Yeah. It was around Huntsville. Actually, I think it was like there's a Marriott hotel
Okay.
over there. I think it was there. I can get the actual name. It's in the report. But yeah, that was really odd. And then the other thing that just comes up is the stories of the white thing in Alabama. That was really interesting to me. You have all these different reports describing essentially either the same individual potentially or multiples that are this like blonde hair color or white hair color. That always was pretty interesting to me too, particularly the blonde, because that's not one that gets reported a lot. But you had this one, you know, area in Alabama, and also there's one in Arkansas too. It's like
Okay.
two spots where all these reports of a blonde Sasquatch pop up. So that was pretty interesting as well. But I think those are my top three. Those are the ones for some reason they've always stuck with me.
Yeah, I can see why. The white thing, it seems to be reported mostly in northern Alabama.
Hmm.
But there was also a report I have read, and I think I did a short on it sometime last year, which was in Washington County, and that's in West Alabama, kind of Southwest Alabama, actually, close to the Mississippi border.
Yeah.
I think it was a truck driver, if I'm not mistaken, had an encounter with one.
Was it a truck driver? Now that you said that, was it a truck driver and they were going over, they had like just crossed a bridge or they were about to go over a bridge?
I believe that's it.
Okay, I think we're talking about the same one because that was really interesting too. And around there, there's like different reports of the blonde because I think that was one of the blonde ones or maybe like the really light blonde, white. I'm not sure. I can't remember specifics, but yeah, that was so interesting because it's just such a like it's such a weird detail. It strays from the norm, I guess.
Yeah, blonde is definitely different, and I'm sure that's a color that you don't see very much at all, do you?
No, not
What's
often.
what's the
No.
most common? The brown or black, I would guess?
Black is the most common, followed by dark, just generally dark. The witness couldn't tell if it was black or dark brown, followed by dark brown, and then medium brown, red brown, and then I think gray is next. I can't quite remember. It kind of dips off significantly. It's not a smooth progression once you get past the red brown. Blonde doesn't show up very often. And like I said, when it does show up, it shows up in pockets, which is so bizarre to me. Like that's so strange. You don't typically have just like one report of a blonde Sasquatch. It's like in these pocketed areas, you'll have a couple. So yeah, that's one that's been kind of like in the back of my brain of why would that be? Like what's why is that happening?
Right. What Let me ask you this, are there certain times of the year that they're more prevalent, the encounters or sightings, or I guess it may depend on where it's located as well?
Yeah, so uh pretty much across the board. There's a few outliers, but when it comes to witness reports, the seasons that pick up the most are the summer and fall. There's a huge increase during the summer and the fall. Personally, I think this is more so driven by human activity. People are outside way more in the summer and the fall than they are at least in the winter. The stark lack of spring sighting reports is pretty interesting to me because people really pick up their activities in the spring too, but you don't see that reflected in the witness reports. So that's kind of strange. But yeah, summer and fall by far have the most. Um, people are hunting, camping, um, that kind of thing. And also animal activities pick up in the summer and fall too. Breeding seasons, they're foraging, they're prepping for winter. So there's all kinds of different explanations that could potentially be the reason for that. But yeah, those two definitely are the highest.
Right. And I know you mentioned this at the first of the episode. So if I was a Sasquatch researcher and just say I was in the Southeast, what's the best time for me to go out and try to spot one or have an encounter?
That I think if I were to give you a for sure answer, I would need you to go out for 2 years consistently and take down notes and data on when stuff happened and when stuff didn't happen. And then I could tell you because the witness reports, and this is something I really changed my tune on too. I'll admit it. I was totally wrong when I first started looking into this stuff because I thought for sure that you could use witness reports to kind of gauge this and understand like when we could go out. You can't. And so I'll totally own up to that. But yeah, the best way to know that is by going out and just getting your hands dirty out in the field, boots on the ground, and taking really great, meticulous notes and making sure that you're writing down when stuff doesn't happen. Because I guess here's the thing, when we have information on when nothing happens, we can start to do some really cool modeling that can biologists use all the time to study rare and elusive animals. But they have data on when stuff does and doesn't happen, so they can use that modeling. When we have presence only data, when we only have data on when stuff does happen, we're very limited on the tools that we can use to predict things like this. But that's where data becomes really powerful, is when we have the full picture of what we're working with. And then we can really say, okay, like, here's the exact moon phase when stuff seems to pick up. Oh, it's statistically significant when we go out during these temperature ranges, or, during this time of the year, or whatever it is. So I think that's my best advice I can give right now is to go out into the field, collect that data for like 2 years. I think that's what we would need. And see see what it says.
Yeah, totally. That totally makes sense. The more detail or the more you have, information, the more you can come to a conclusion. So,
Yeah, and I that's part of the reason I've been putting together like worksheets and guides that are totally free resources. And anyone can, get them and have access to them. Is I'm trying to be as thorough as possible, because there's things that you might not even realize are important in the field that would be just like gold for a data scientist or someone that's trying to look at the data. And so yeah, that's part of the reason I put together these worksheets and these guides for folks, to make sure that we're extracting and getting as much information as possible from these, field research investigations. I mean, that's the best data that we could possibly ever have, is from folks in the field. Um, and it's really exciting research. And I just want to make sure it gets documented properly so that we can use it.
right, right, absolutely. I'm going to go in reverse just a second. And you brought this up at the first of the episode, the Finding Bigfoot, the very first show, which is probably one of my favorites, by the way. That particular encounter, do you know much about that encounter that happened in North Georgia?
No, I don't. Yeah. No, when that came out, I was I was like either in 5th grade or 6th grade or something. So I like barely had a grasp on what was happening around me just in general. Um so no, I don't really know much past what is in the episode. Um and yeah, like at that time I didn't even really realize that sighting reports were coming out of that part of Georgia, or Georgia at all for that matter. And I just remember being so surprised that I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's like 10 minutes from my house." Stuff's happening. But
Right.
yeah, I wish I had more information for you, but I
Yeah,
don't.
no problem. That area uh, is extremely active. It seems like
Mhm.
the amount of
It is.
reports that come out of there.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's very active, and um yeah, that there's a lot that comes out of there. And I mean there is even like, yeah, it's a very active area. And I don't know if folks really realize it. Georgia's not one, I don't think, that gets really talked about a lot, which is kind of surprising. We have a lot of mountains, like pretty mountainous areas that are very remote,
Yes.
and very few people living in the hills. So there's plenty of area, there's plenty of room for a large ape of some kind to live up there. And, it's all connected through the Appalachians and whatnot. So yeah. And it's just beautiful up there too. If I was a Sasquatch, I'd want to live there.
Right. Georgia's unique. It has the mountains, in North Georgia, but it also has the Okefenokee Swamp in the southern
Yes.
part as well. And I had a gentleman on sometime last year. His father, in the late 70s, reported he was a truck driver as well. And his father reported I'm saying, let me back up. He did not report. He told his son when he got home off of a road trip that he saw something that did not make sense. It was standing
Mm,
close to a sign, like a highway sign. And the closer he got to it, he was like, why are there green reflectors by this sign? It doesn't look right.
hmm,
And the closer he
mhm,
got, he realized his headlights hit it, and it was a Sasquatch. And, the guy told me his dad had no reason to make it up. He didn't,
mhm.
try to embellish the story or gain any popularity from it. But I thought that was pretty neat. How, especially the reflection.
Yeah, the green. That's when red is the most reported, but green is the second most, which is interesting. Always interested in this eye shine conversation because once you start looking into how the tapetum lucidum even works and how it evolves in certain species and how it can differ, um, pretty interesting. Yeah, the green. Did he mention how big the eyes seemed?
He did not mention how big the eyes were. And for him
Okay.
to see them, I guess in a truck from a distance, they had to be pretty good size. But the height of the creature was, I believe he said, close to the height of his window in the semi truck, which would
Okay.
be roughly about 8 feet,
Yeah.
7 to 8
Hmm.
feet.
Okay.
So pretty big
Yeah, that's
animal.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, down in the swamps, that would be an interesting place to go. I don't know if there are really any researchers down there looking in that area. I think if they're looking at the swampy stuff, they're probably in Florida.
Yeah.
And if they're in Georgia, they're in the mountains. That'd be interesting to know.
Right. Yeah. I've interviewed some down in Florida, but nobody that I know of is in that area. It would be a very interesting place to research.
Might be an untapped spot.
It's maybe correct. Yes. Terrestrial. Let me ask you this: what would you tell a skeptic?
That's a good question. What would I tell them? Would I be trying to convince them that Sasquatches are real, or what's the question? What am I asking or what am I arguing for?
If somebody said there's no way that there's a creature that exists in North America that is 8 feet tall, bipedal, and hairy, that someone has not, especially a hunter, an outdoorsman, has not, you know, I guess,
Taken.
killed or taken and brought
Yeah.
in. I guess that's where I'm going with it.
Okay. I would first start with it's a good question. Let me think really quick. So lately I've been giving some library presentations
Okay.
and I have on uh different scientific fields that we can look at and examine within the Sasquatch topic. And I do have some skeptics come in, and it's pretty interesting to talk to them afterwards. Because I found that most people who are skeptical, at least those who come, so they have to have some kind of interest, right? They're pretty open, but they're just kind of like, I don't know about the whole thing. It kind of wigs them out. So I think I would probably talk about the different patterns that are seen within witness reports and also talk about statistically, these are your chances that this kind of pattern that kind of mimics known animal behaviors would actually show up if all of these witness reports were hoaxed and just spaghetti on a wall and just people making stuff up. That's probably what I would start with. And particularly with my interest in this apparent correlation between a witness's fear level and estimated height of the Sasquatch. As fear level goes up, the estimated height also goes up. It's pretty interesting. I'd probably talk about the history of the great apes too, because I think that's worth noting. And I really I'm also very interested in indigenous, basically like culture around Sasquatch. And, it's not a new topic. It's something that's been around for centuries and potentially thousands of years with indigenous people. And so that's also something that I find really interesting. And that's one of the things that folks have brought up actually after my presentations. They're like, I didn't realize that we had that indigenous nations had all these like stories and history and knowledge bases around Sasquatch and had been talking about it for, potentially thousands of years and whatnot. So those are probably the three main things I would hit. But also, I like to understand like why people are skeptical. I like to ask them like, what is it? What is it that doesn't click for you? Is it because of how it's been portrayed in the media? Is it because maybe you just don't, you haven't looked into it enough, so you just don't know? So that's also something I'd probably ask as well. Along with talk about the footprints, which you can't see, but I love talking about the footprint casts and different biomarkers and all that kind of stuff.
And I was going to ask you about that as well. Has your cast collection grown?
It has, not recently, but I think since the last time we've talked, I've added I think I've added 2 casts, maybe. I don't know if I had the Grace Harbor cast the last time we talked. I think maybe I did, but I know I didn't have Wrinklefoot. I'm pretty sure. Maybe I did.
And
I'm
where
not
did
sure.
where did that cast come from?
All of my casts are from the North American Bigfoot Center.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I get them all from Cliff, and which I highly recommend if anybody's looking to grow their cast collection. Get them from the NABC. Those are the highest quality, and they're fantastic. And he's just a cool dude. But yeah, I think Wrinklefoot's probably my newest one that I've added since the last time we've talked.
And what state was that in? That was it casted in?
Mm, oh, I can't remember. I would have to look it up. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
I gotcha. Yeah, and I've never been to. I've been to Expedition Bigfoot Museum in North Georgia
Mm-hmm.
in Blue Ridge,
Yeah.
or outside of LJ, whatever you want to call it. But I have not been to the one in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard very good things about it as
Yeah.
well.
I've been to the one in Georgia too. I went, I think in 2024. But I've not made it out to the NABC yet. I really, really want to though. It's like on my bucket list. I just got to
Yeah.
get over my fear of flying.
Yeah, that's a bucket list thing for sure. Well, Terrestrial, at the end of each episode, I do a rapid fire Q&A. I'll ask you 3 questions. It's casual, and it's the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
All right. Favorite hobby outside of research?
Embroidery?
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. My wife wants to get into embroidery a little bit.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
it's so fun. There's so many kits and stuff online you can get. And it's just fun to be able to make stuff with your hands and have something else to do besides like, all my work is pretty much on a screen. So I like working with my hands.
yeah. She tried the crochet kit,
Mm.
but she gave up on it. She said,
Oh, I don't blame. I've tried crochet so many times. I just can't get into it. But embroidery has stuck. I think she should try it. It's fun.
I'll tell her. Have to tell her that. All right. Number 2, favorite time of the year.
Used to be fall, but I think I'm a spring kind of girl now.
Okay. Yeah, we don't. Here we're in East Central Alabama. Fall. I love fall. That's probably my favorite. Well, this past year was so dry. The leaves turned. The colors weren't as bright. It seemed like, and
Yeah.
and it was dry, and they fell off. Kind of early. So, but yeah, my wife's summer. I'm fall. So
Oh, nice.
yeah. Number 3, books or movies. If you had one choice.
That's a hard one. I like both. Um, Maybe books, but just barely. Just barely.
Barely. What's one or two of your favorite books?
Ooh. Um, I've been rereading. I go through my Bigfoot books all the time. I'll read them and then reread them again just to make sure everything's stuck. I've been going through the Discovery of Sasquatch, which is one of Bender Noggles' books. I think that is my favorite, at
Okay.
least that I've read lately. But I do really like Lyle Blackburn's books too. If I'm feeling more like I want witness report kind of vibe.
Right. Yeah. I like
Honestly,
Lyle
any of his.
Blackburn's. I like some of his work.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm going to ask you this. If you had one movie to pick, what would be your favorite?
One movie. Mm, oh man, That's hard. Let me think. I know there's one that I'm totally blanking on for some reason. That's my favorite. Oh my gosh, my whole brain has just gone blank. Well, we just watched the original Indiana Jones, and that was pretty good.
Those are
I don't know,
good.
that wasn't my favorite movie, but that's like I'm thinking, what have we watched lately? You know what? One of my comfort movies is Princess and the Frog. So
Okay.
maybe that. Like whenever I'm feeling down.
Princess and the Frog.
Yeah, Princess and the Frog or Moana.
Yeah, that's, I think, Moana's Disney. Is Princess and the Frog Disney as well? Or I'm
Yeah,
not
it
sure.
is.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
awesome. Terrestrial, thank you for coming back on the show. I've truly enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always so good to be on and catch up with you. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Tell the listeners where they can find you on social media and keep up with all of the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, so you can find me on pretty much any social media platform: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. All of my handles on everything is at Sasquatch Data. You can also check out SasquatchDataProject.com, and that's where I have all of my free resources and whatnot if anyone's interested. You can also take a sneak peek at the data set that hopefully will be ready within the next few months or so for public use. But yeah, I pretty much keep it to my socials, and I update my website sometimes with blogs and whatnot. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Gotcha. I will put a link down in the description for the listeners to check everything out, and I would recommend it because your work is fantastic and it's very thorough, and you can tell you put a lot of time and heart into it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yes, no doubt. And for the listeners, if you've had an encounter or something strange or unexplained, click on our link tree in the description and share your encounter. Thank you for listening, and God bless.